of player trafficking in Mongolia, so this was a big thing. Players would come in from Africa, be told they'd be given a certain salary, and they just wouldn't pay it. And we didn't realise, we saw them sleeping in the park, rough. So then we had to just basically smuggle them out of the country. We had to pay, bribe. The amazing thing that did happen is we got a coach. We advertised, as with all great clubs, I advertised on Twitter saying basically, can anyone come and coach us? Season starts next week. We got loads of applicants, but one applicant was amazing. The CV was just insanely good. He'd worked with like Roberto Martinez. He was like, like, wow, this is a good coach. He's called Shadab Iftikhar, and this CV came in. And I was like, this is amazing. Like,
did you know? I'm guessing the position was like unpaid or very low pay.
No, we did have we had a salary to pay. It was not great. It was pretty bad. So I phoned him up, and he was in the car park at Asda in Preston, and I was like, and he was talking to me. I was like, I was almost trying to talk him out of the job because I was like, we have no money. We are going to get thrashed. Do you really want to do this? Like, your CV's amazing. Why do you want to do this? And he was just like, honestly, it's really hard to get jobs with my name. It's racism. It's a really hard structural thing because he is a Muslim, because he's Pakistani heritage. Like, he said, like, opportunities do not come along. And he was like, he basically knew my club better than I did at the interview. He was like, I know exactly what I'm going to do if I come in. Just let me do it. And like I said, that salary was, and he was like, I'll do it. I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. Can you have a little think about the salary and maybe just come back to me if there's any chance you can pay a bit more? Phoned him back. I was like, there really isn't. He's like, God, you're a hard negotiator. I was like, no, we just literally have no money. And he was on the next flight. He flew. He went from Preston to Ulaanbaatar in time for our second game. We didn't get him in time for the first game where we got bashed. And he did an amazing job that season. Like, we barely won any games. We won, I think, twice, maybe once, but he did such wonders for that team in keeping us like competitive. And he was like, yeah, it was incredible watching him work because he was obviously so technically and tactically astute. And he was like one of these guys who works like 12-hour days, if not more. And he would watch every moment of every game, every team we were playing. And I was in and out of Mongolia. But often when I was in the UK, he would just phone me at like 3 a.m. I'd be like, oh God, what's happened? And he's like, I know exactly how to stop Hong Hom's right winger. I'd be like, great, mate.
But you want them, innit? You want your manager to be like that.
Obsessed with the game. Yeah. Amazing kid. Like, amazing guy, young coach. Learned his trade on Football Manager.
Wow.
Like, and then
you hear about that more and more now.
Yeah. And basically his way of getting in was he stood outside, I think it was Wigan's training ground, until Roberto Martinez would talk to him and let him do a scouting report. And it was so good. He was like, you can do me another one. And it just carried on. So he became like his kind of guru. And so, yeah, since Bayern Goal, which was probably the low point of his career, but
so when something like that happens and there's not a lot of money for the coach, would you provide them with like somewhere to live and things like that?
Yeah, we did. It was a terrible. It was probably a terrible apartment by UK standards. It was pretty much the one that I lived in when I was there. Right. They're very like Russian style high-rise buildings. And he joked and called it the Only Fools and Horses apartment because it was that kind of yeah. But so was the one I lived in. So the one that I lived in. If you plugged two things in one of the plug sockets, it would just give you a little electric shock. And so I was just like, this cannot be right. But it was fine, and it was warm at least in the colder months. But yeah, like he was on so little really, and we had so little, and everything was just like grabbing what little we could to keep this club running. And it was all just because these kids loved it and believed in it and were proud to play for them. And the other clubs weren't like that. The other clubs would bring in players like for a few months from abroad, they'd win the league with them, and then they'd just cycle them through. So young kids were just not getting a chance anywhere else. And so we kind of really felt like we had a mission.
Yeah. And you did some great things, right? I mean, didn't you bring a player over from Mongolia, the player you brought over to Barnet, was it? Or you wanted to get him a trial there?
Yeah, so that was great. He wasn't actually one of our players, but we never wanted to be like factional and like, you know, tribal about it. We were like, look, one of the biggest problems for players here is they don't have a chance to like experience other ways of playing and other styles and like test themselves. So we said to the federation that we want to bring out 2 players and a coach from Mongolia to the UK, and we'll give them an experience with the UK club, and just, you know, they'll take that back with them, and it'll be kind of massive for their development. And there was a lot of like backwards and forwards, but in the end we brought over one kid who was amazing called Gambold Gambaya, who was like their star player. He was like 16, I think, at the time, and he was their like biggest hope.
Is he playing in the national team and stuff like that?
Yeah, so at the time he was like in their youth
Right.
setup. He played for Hom Hom, that team that I said before. But we didn't care. Like, we just wanted the kid to have a good experience. So I managed to broker for him to go to Barnet for the summer. All of them, in fact, him and a slightly older player and the coach, Tulga, who was like the coach of Urchim actually at the time. And so they all came over and just, they had the most amazing experience. We got them an Airbnb in Edgware, which I actually ended up paying for that because the Federation just never paid me. But I was like,
there's a running theme here.
Yeah, right. I was like, no, I expected that. And it was quite funny because I was booking this Airbnb in Edgware, and the woman who owned it was like, so, you know, I hope you have a nice time. And I was like, oh, it's actually, I'm getting this for 3 Mongolians. And she's just like, I don't ask any questions. I was like no, it's not weird. It's just 3 Mongolians. But yeah, they loved it. And Gambaya, like, he had this incredible spell, and he played for, because he was just supposed to train with Barnet. Like, there wasn't any like obligation on their side, but he was really good. So they started to put him in their under 16s, and he scored like quite a few goals. He put up some assists. The ones that I remember are he scored past Jose Mourinho's son, who was playing in goal for Fulham at the time. And he was just brilliant. And it was such an experience for this kid because you see him growing with each. But also for the coach, coming over and just seeing how a professional setup in this country, they were League 2 at the time, Barnet. Yeah. But just to see what that looks like compared to back in Mongolia, it was, you could see the cogs where you could see, like, he's thinking, oh, this is how we should be doing it. Like this. Yeah. And so that impact that month, it was a month and a bit, had on him was amazing. And then Gamba signed for Pushkas Academia in Hungary and became like the first European professional Mongolian to play in Europe.
Wow.
And he's still in their national team now. He's like one of their best players. So that experience for me was like, we really did like something good there.
Yeah.
And it was a strange way for it to have all happened, but we did that and said, look, if anyone else wants to do this kind of thing, we can do it. But the other thing that we were doing at the time, which was really difficult, was we had to deal with a lot of there was a lot of player trafficking in Mongolia. So this was a big thing. Right. Players would come in from Africa, be told they'd be given a certain salary, and they just wouldn't pay it, and they wouldn't get them their immigration status. So they were illegal immigrants. And these players then,
why would someone do that? Get them over, and then they take a look at them, and they don't want to pay them anymore.
No, well, that was so they either discard them. But what one of the teams did, and this was really bad. They were quite a big team. They were in like Asian competitions. They brought over 2 players, and we didn't realize we saw them sleeping in the park rough. Like, Mongolia is not a good place to sleep in the park rough. So we came across these lads, and we're like, well, what are you doing and sleeping here? And they're like, well, look, the club brought us over. And as part of the deal, they were going to pay us this salary, and it was like fine, like it was totally fine salary. But what the club did then was they said, your visa got rejected. You keep playing for us, but this is your new salary while we pay this money is going to go to the admin of us working out your immigration status. And they had nowhere to go because they're illegal immigrants. If they went to the police,
they're still allowed to play in the league, though. It's not like
this is the thing. They weren't. But the club weren't letting on to the FA that they were illegal immigrants now, because otherwise they would have been banned. So these players' salaries were just cut, and they couldn't afford their apartment. So they were living rough. And these players were like, look, can we sign for your club? Because, you know, it seems like you're decent people. And we're like, yeah, but the problem is, like, you're illegal immigrants. We won't be allowed to sign. They were like, look, we just want to go home. So what we did was we signed them. Didn't really sign them in any real sense. We put them into our squad, let them train with us. We put them up in a house with our players. We told the club that they had been playing for, look, we know what you've done. We're going to report this to the league. Report it to the league, and the league said, oh, it's terrible. They're banned now. They can't play football. And that's all they did.
They banned the players?
Banned the players. Just said, yeah, no, not at all. Just said those players are banned.
Madness.
Not that we knew that would happen. Yeah. The players knew that would happen. So then we had to just basically smuggle them out of the country. We had to pay bribe to get them out of the country safely to their country. And that was all we could do. We tried to contact diplomatic representation. We tried all sorts of stuff. We're like, look, this is our situation. And all the diplomatic representation said was like, do not deal with these players. They're criminals. And I was like, they're not criminals. They're kids who have been tricked. And so, yeah, we paid a bribe to get them out of the country. And actually that bribe was all that was left of our budget, basically. So when we came bottom of that league that year, we had blown through all our money, and we just experienced like how grubby football at that level could be. And we could see these clubs succeeding, and like winning things, treating players like that. And we were just like, we don't want to do that. We want to be a youth team now, but we don't want to get involved in that.
Yeah,
that
it's
mess.
amazing what competition, or it's not even competition, it's the ego, isn't it? It's the ego of these guys that run these clubs. Clearly in any country in the world, you know, Outer Mongolia is used as the thing in common parlance, isn't it? Like the furthest place you can go. But even there, or in Mongolia, or whatever, the same stuff's happening. You know, we see it in non-league all the time. It is always comes back to ego. Whoever runs these clubs, they want, for whatever reason, whatever sort of thirst in their soul they need to quench with football, and they will do anything to get it.